Cool. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Super excited about this session. I really appreciate you all's willingness to, adapt with us as we're learning how to just put on a conference virtually as a whole, and as we're doing these sessions. I'm super excited about today's topic. One of my goals for this session is for it to be a lot more interactive. So if you're in a place where you're able, I would absolutely love it for you to be able to have your screen on so that we can see your face as we're talking as well. If you're not, I totally understand. I'm definitely guilty of having left a Zoom meeting the other day because people were like, everyone turn on your cameras. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I get it. But if you can, we'd really love to get to see you as we're talking. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about what works and what doesn't work in regard to just the whole virtual working environment and working with virtual professionals. So I think it's a really important topic. I know kind of in March, it was this weird dynamic for a lot of recruiters and hiring managers where they were suddenly like, oh, we're trying to figure out how to work remotely ourselves. And now we're trying to figure out how to bring people on remotely. We just don't even know how to do this. And so I think it's going to be a really good session as a whole. So the educator in me had to include an agenda just to let you all know kind of how this is going to be going. To start off, we're going to be talking about kind of common shortfalls in virtual internships because we're going to be talking about virtual working as a whole, but we're going to be focusing on it through the lens of virtual internships. So I'll be sharing a little bit about my experience with students on what they said didn't really work this summer. And then we're going to be joined by a really fantastic panel of current supply chain students to talk about best practices in virtual onboarding and working. After that, we're going to open it up for some Q&A. So you all will be able to post questions in the chat. And because it's a typical Zoom meeting, you're also welcome to use that raise hand feature. And I'm happy to call on you for you to turn on your mic and ask your question yourself. And then after that, I just have a few words to kind of wrap up. Before we really get into it, though, I want to start with a little caveat and just kind of acknowledge that this last summer was really weird as a whole, and it was hard. And I know, we were really fortunate at UT. We only were told about 23 companies canceling internships, which out of the hundreds of companies that recruit our students every year, like that's such an amazing number. But I do want to just acknowledge, like, it was very hard for companies to pivot at the last second. Because again, you were probably in the process of figuring out how to work remotely yourself and manage your permanent employees, let alone bringing on new hires and interns and figuring out how to move projects to virtual and how to move training virtual. And so even though I'm going to be a little bit nitpicky, I don't want you all to see it as me saying like, oh, you should feel bad about this if you did this wrong. Because one thing that was consistent from student feedback was every student that did an internship this summer always started by saying, I'm just so thankful that they still let me intern, because I totally understand that they had, almost every excuse in the book to not. So I do just want to say, like, kudos to you if you kept your internship program this summer. So even if maybe some of the things that I'm sharing about, like, oh, this wasn't the best, apply to you, know that like you still did a great job just by even offering students the opportunity to still gain experience. So I want to start with some commonly reported shortfalls. I joked that I was going to name this "How to Lose an Intern in 10 Days," but I wasn't quite sure that people would get the reference. So, oh, my bad. So basically, I've grouped this into 4 main buckets for you guys. Because just so you all know, I spent the last 2 months surveying / interviewing roughly about 50 students in supply chain, most of which have been a part of or are currently a part of our Supply Chain Scholars of Distinction program. And basically, I just kind of asked them a lot of open-ended questions. Hey, tell me about your experience this summer. Like, what went well? What didn't go well? What would you have liked to see different? And so what I've done here is I've kind of grouped it into the 4 main themes that I saw as far as what what wasn't the best this summer. And I have them kind of in order of what I saw came about most frequently. So number one I want to touch on is safety. This is a bit of an odd one out on here and one of the less common ones because we had a number of students be switched to hybrid internships. A lot of the time what that looked like was they'd be brought in for a week for orientation and then work remotely for the rest of the summer. Or some of them actually did do like, 2 days in the office, 3 days working from their apartment, or like coming in for like a 1 week immersion. So there were a range of different hybrid options, which, by the way, students really appreciated. And a lot of the ones who were fully virtual said they wished it could have been hybrid. But a theme that we saw, unfortunately, was that not all companies were necessarily following proper safety precautions. And so students felt very unsafe when they were going in for these hybrid experiences because the company wasn't enforcing masks, they weren't enforcing social distancing. And so then it kind of made students pretty nervous, especially for the ones that, were going back and forth from the office to home, because, some said, I had an immunocompromised parent that I was living with. And so it made me really nervous because I went in and no one was wearing masks in the office. So not really creating that culture of safety. The second most frequent thing that we saw was just in regard to assignments that students were given. I think as things moved virtually, a lot of the more relevant projects kind of went out the window for the summer. And for some, it makes sense. It's a little bit hard to pivot all positions to being remote or virtual. But what we had quite a few students come back a little disappointed with at the end of the summer was they said, like, I didn't really learn anything about supply chain. Like, I was supposed to be, learning about distribution center operations or procurement or something like that. And really, like, it ended up not being that at all. They weren't able to successfully move my project to being a virtual project, or they didn't really train me in any of the areas that they said they would before. And so the unfortunate thing for them was they came back and they'd say, oh, yeah, I had this internship with this great company. But then when employers have been asking them to talk about what they did, they don't really have great stuff to say, which puts them in just a really hard situation. Again, they're kind of the perspective like, oh, it was great. Like they still paid me. They still, taught me some things. I just didn't learn a lot. And on the flip side of that, students who were given really great projects, really great work to do, also reported receiving a lot less support than they would have expected. So just not very clear expectations, or just kind of being thrown into a project. And not really having the people around them to be able to get the help that they need, which kind of goes into point 3 of support. I think one of the things that was very common was just not getting even like the materials and instruction needed to be able to do kind of basic parts of the job, especially thinking of coming on with a company for the first day, having a computer already ready, having an email already set up, login credentials to get into any of the systems needed are all really important. And I think we actually hear a lot in traditional internships how that's not necessarily the case. Is students might be there for a week before they get a lot of those things, but virtually especially, they might not have had the resources necessary to be able to adequately do their job. And one thing to think about too, especially in a virtual environment, is at least in my own office culture, I very much am a fan of just like yelling through the walls when I need help. Mary is very familiar with me just being like, Mary, what is this? And so you lose that when you're in a virtual environment, and especially if new employees or interns don't have a lot of different contacts they can reach out to, or a really easy way of asking questions and getting help, that becomes just a really big stumbling block for them. And then the final piece was just networking. So it was a little bit sad. I know a lot of us this summer probably felt pretty alone in what we were doing. And that's, unfortunately the nature of what just like summer 2020 looked like. But especially bringing in a new employee into an organization, it's so important that you're allowing opportunities to network with peers. And so students reported like, hey, I didn't get to know any of the other interns in my cohort, or I only worked with my supervisor, or I really only worked with these like 3 people. And it made it really hard to do this project because I wasn't introduced to other people. And so they really lost that piece that to them is like so important for being able to really learn like the culture of company and like what it is that they can really enjoy about a work environment, because they were kind of isolated and left to do most of their job just on their own. So those are kind of the 4 main like buckets of what went wrong this summer, or maybe what didn't work quite as well. I want to take the bulk of our time today, though, to focus on what did go well, what things really worked and what was successful. So I'm about to stop sharing my screen here real quick, because I have a panel of 4 of our scholars of distinction with us today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And then we're going to talk a little bit about kind of best practices for working remotely from a young professional's perspective. So to go ahead and move forward, Blake, let's go ahead and start with you. If you don't mind, if you could each introduce yourself, give your name, your year, share where you worked this summer, and also just a little bit about what your internship looked like.
All right. Hello, my name is Blake McKinney. I am a senior, and I interned at Goldman Sachs this summer within the operations division, and I worked in loan operations. So this summer I kind of got to work on 3 different main projects, and then additionally got to work on some daily work within my team. So a lot of my time was spent just working with my teammates and kind of learning what they're doing every single day, and kind of understanding what the process is like within loan operations, and seeing kind of some of the projects they work on, and networking with some of the individuals that work in other teams that we connect with.
Awesome. Thank you, Blake. Ellie, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ellie Stevens. I'm a senior majoring in supply chain management with a concentration in business analytics. I had an intern with Frito-Lay this past summer. I was working with the fleet team, and essentially I worked on a toll violation project and helped with their supplier management and information needed to roll out a new transponder for their fleet.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellie. Brandon?
Hi everyone, I'm Brandon Thatch. I'm a junior studying supply chain management with a concentration in business analytics, and I interned this past summer with Caterpillar. And the whole virtualness of it actually helped my main project, which was port optimization studies with imports on our last mile team coming from different regions around the globe.
Awesome, thanks, Brandon. And Wes?
Hey everyone, my name is Wes Watson, and I'm a senior graduating this upcoming May. So this past summer, I interned at ExxonMobil as a procurement intern on their contractor services team. So really, I was tasked with establishing and building an efficient, up-to-date, formal inline file review process and framework, which checked their controls and procedures by leveraging really the past data. And so this included a process flow map, reporting and analysis application and tools. But again, the virtual environment also kind of helped me with my project as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Wes. So if you could, I'd love to hear from each of you just a little bit about what like your virtual like orientation and onboarding process looked like with your job, including maybe like what types of like materials or information you were provided with in order to help you understand the company and just be successful in your position. So Brandon, you okay if we start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Caterpillar onboarding process was actually very neat. So we got, some of us actually got company computer assets like a week or 2 before our orientation sessions, but the first 2 days of our actual internship involved 2 8-hour orientation sessions just to kind of just onboard us with all the people that we need to email if we ran into any issues with, say, logging our hours or just any type of systems troubles we'd had or anything like that. And then they also did they found a way to still do some machine demos at one of the sites. So they showed us, you know, the kind of the impact, you know, the different machines. And so with the 2-day orientation session, it really just showed us all the, you know, different training and learning we're going to have to do, all the resource groups and just everything out there at Caterpillar that was there to help us, and just the network that's there to support us from day 1 and day 2. And then right after that, we were handed over to our supervisors to learn exactly what we're going to be doing on our projects and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you. Wes, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first few days at ExxonMobil were really structured actually. So they had a formal onboarding process with the people that were still on campus in Houston as well. And so they would have someone over the Skype kind of going over overview with like 300 other people. And so we actually received our laptops about a week before we started, and we had a whole booklet of instructions for like how do you set up our laptop, how to get access to their servers, and then all the information we needed to get in touch with any IT people. Because I remember the first day, obviously, I was like, I couldn't even get in my computer for the first like 6 hours. And so they gave us the numbers beforehand to kind of mitigate that risk. And then kind of during my onboarding process, they still had a way to have a series where we got to talk with different VPs and really get a broad perspective of ExxonMobil overall, as well as kind of giving us an introduction to all of our other interns, as well as the people that actually recruited us. And so that was really nice to see kind of the first week to start getting the context of everyone we'll be working with in our cohort, as well as kind of our direct managers and everything.
Awesome. Thank you. Ellie, how about you?
Yeah, so starting from like the very beginning, they informed us April 10th that our internship was actually going to be 6 weeks instead of 10 weeks. Trying to getting us prepared for like canceling our living or wherever we were going to be. And so they shipped us a laptop a week before. They were like constantly communicating with us. This is how it's going to work. You're going to get your laptop by this date. If you don't, call this person, and also send us a booklet of like how to log on and everything. So the first day we were able to log on, the IT system actually crashed because all of us were trying to log on at the same time. But they were very communicative and were like, hey, you and 15 others, y'all are going to log on at this specific time. And so they were very like prepared for that to happen. And then our first week was pretty much orientation, and then we were able to start on our projects right away. And I would say throughout the internship, I was still learning different parts of the organization and doing any trainings that just might pop up and I would need to know in the future. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And Blake.
Yeah, so we kind of started and we first took it was kind of like a course that we got to take, just about an overview of the firm and what they do. So we started with that, and that was in, I think, May. We had May through June to do it. It was kind of optional, but it was really informative about the different areas of the firm that you might be working with and seeing kind of what they do. And then our first week, the first 2 days, our first day set up our systems and kind of learned about what the systems were like. Similar to Ellie, we kind of had like a spaced out time to come in, and they would set up our systems like that. And then the remainder of that day, we kind of met and we learned about the entire firm. So kind of went through an overview of what exactly Goldman Sachs does, kind of what businesses they work with, what they're going to be doing throughout the future. Additionally, we the next day kind of spent within our division. So I spent with operations specifically. We learned specifically about what operations does and kind of how that goes into that. And then the remainder of the week we spent with our designated teams, and then we learned about what our teams specifically do, kind of met and networked with the people within that.
Awesome, thanks. So building off of that a little bit, what exactly did your companies do to make you feel like you were a part of a team? Like, were there specific events, programs, anything like that that they helped connect you with, or that they had as a structured part of your internship program that really helped you get to know the others around you or just feel like more part of the company? Wes, you mind if we start with you?
Definitely. So I kind of start with like the informal stuff. I remember, because obviously my date also to start got changed in the beginning. I actually had my mentor, buddy, and then two of my managers reach out like 2 weeks before the internship even started. And they didn't really talk about work. We didn't really get into detail, but they just let me know about the structure, what my project would look like, and just wanted to get to know me. And so I remember that was really cool to see that they were taking the time before I even started just to get to know who I was and kind of my working style. And then kind of more formally, we actually had weekly check-ins with our entire intern cohort and two of the recruiters who got us to go there. And so those would be on Fridays. And then we wouldn't really even necessarily talk about our work or projects. We just talked about any challenges we were kind of having and just really wanting to learn more about us away from work and getting to know our personal interests, which was really nice. And then they had another program too, which I kind of called Lunch and Learns. And that was for a week, an hour or two every single week. And it would be with a VP or someone on the leadership team in procurement. And so they would talk to us about their role, but really it was nice because it was a Q&A, and obviously they're really busy and they're in charge of a lot of people, but they would kind of take time out of their day to answer any questions we had about their job or general advice, being a young college student about to enter the workforce. And then we also had Empower. So with ExxonMobil, Empower team are the student, or I guess young careers who have been there for 1 year or two. And so we actually had 2 meetings every single week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so it was broken up in a really small group. So it would be 2 Empower people and then 2 interns. And you would stay with that group the whole summer. So you'd really get to know those Empower students or I guess members. And it was really nice because by the end of the summer, now we have their contacts. We follow each other on social media and they call in and check in to see how you're doing in school. And then again, we had actually more check-ins with our managers. So I had another check-in, a formal one each week with both my hiring managers in procurement. But they were also, I would say, informally, outside of that, they would check in on Skype and just say, hey, how are you doing? How's your project? And so I know that's kind of a long answer, but I definitely feel like having that kind of open communication, really making you feel comfortable with the team and not only saying, we want you because you provide value, but also we're interested in who you are as a person was really nice to see. And it definitely in the obviously environment where you're not around a lot of people made a huge difference this summer for me.
Yeah. No, I love that. I didn't think that was a long answer at all. That's really awesome that they did so much to make you really feel like you had a support system around you. So that's great. Brandon, let's jump over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Kat, or at least my supervisors, and as part of it being Kat as well, did a great job of really connecting me in. So my supervisor, quite literally the first about week and a half, she connected me with everyone on her team to have these hour one-on-one sessions where I'd get to know them, they'd get to know me, how can they help me with the project that I'm about to, start. And so they really just threw me right into the team and welcomed me and just open arms and getting ready to sit down and really start on the project. And then Kat also connected me with someone who was in the development program that they have, the rotational program. And so I got to meet with him every week and we discussed, and we ended up actually figuring out that we both play the same video game. And so throughout the week after work, we'd hop off work and go play a video game together. And so that was really cool as well. And then our functional area coordinators would actually have these different lunch and learns, kind of like Wes mentioned, throughout the week, as well as just check-in. So you can go in, ask any questions to her and the rest of the intern cohort there and talk about whatever you wanted. And then actually there's a few people from UTK who also were interning at CAT. So I scheduled something with them every other week just to kind of talk and see where they were at in their internships and things like that. And then if you wanted to get plugged in even more, there were plenty of employee resource groups that had different events going on with executive in residences and all these types of meetings and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you. That sounds really great. I love that you were able to also get plugged in outside of work hours too. Blake, what about you?
Yeah, so at the beginning of my internship, before we even started, we actually got to connect with other interns. So they kind of sent us a new intern to connect with each week, and we kind of got to network with them before we started at Goldman. So that was really great just to meet some people before we actually got started and kind of connect with some different people. Going into the internship, formally I had a buddy, which was someone that was specifically on my team. And then I had which was another vice president or someone that worked on a different team and kind of got to learn about what their team does. And then I had a meeting with my manager as well weekly for 30 minutes with each of those to learn how I'm doing, maybe learn about their team, or kind of just catch up and see how my week's going and how things are going. Additionally, I was also had an LGBTQ plus mentor, and they kind of specifically let me know about what the firm does, about the affinity group, what they're working on. Additionally, I was based out of the Dallas office, so I kind of got to learn what the affinity group was like in Dallas, and learn about what their events are like and that kind of thing, and the community there. And then finally, we also had a daily kind of thing. It was either informative about the entire firm, or we kind of got to learn about the Dallas office specifically, or we got to learn about operations. So we had one every day about lunchtime, kind of learned about some different areas of the firm. They were about an hour long, and they were kind of Q&A based. So it was really informative. They really made sure that we all felt really connected. And so we got to meet a lot of people while we were there.
That's awesome. I love that they also like personalized how they did matches and found people with similar interests or who can help get you involved in ways that might fit you really well. So that's really fantastic. Ellie, how about you?
Yes. So similar to Brandon, I think one of the first times I met with my manager, he gave me a long list of people that I needed to talk to on the team. And I met with a few of them before I really understood my project that well, but they were able to help me understand it better, which I think was really important. They were always open to meeting with me, putting time on their calendar to make sure that they don't get too busy. And also my manager was able to solidify at least 30 minutes daily to talk to me, just to make sure that everything was going well, and help me talk to anyone that I needed to. One thing that I think that Frito-Lay did that was really cool, and they wouldn't have been able to do it if it was not in a virtual setting, was they set us up with a cross-functional team of other interns across the United States for us to work on a project together. It was kind of like a marketing project, something a little bit fun. It was a competition between all of the groups of interns. And I got to meet these people that are just going to different colleges than me, doing completely different. Some of them were field interns, which is different. They're doing different things than headquarter interns. And so I think that was really cool. And I think they really utilized us being virtual so that we could reach out to people from all across the US. And then of course we had, happy hours or just random workouts actually that they set up for us. And it was really just like every single day I felt like I had something that I was meeting someone new or talking to someone new, whether another intern or somebody on the fleet team, that it would be important for me to know them. And I also felt like I had a lot of responsibility. And so that gave me kind of something that would make me feel more part of the team. Given that responsibility, I then needed other people to help me with that responsibility sometimes. So I was reaching out to people that I hadn't talked to, or I asked my manager, like, who could help me with this? And he's like, oh, maybe this person. So really just helping me network and talking to different people. I think that really made me feel like part of the team. And given the responsibility that I did, I, felt important even virtually.
That's awesome. I really love how you felt like you were able to get to meet people every day, because I think one of the things that you lose in the virtual work environment as a whole is like those water cooler conversations where it's just, that person standing at the printer with you while you're waiting for some stuff. And I think those relationships can often turn out like really, really great. And so it's awesome that they were creating just opportunities for you to engage in like such random ways like workouts and stuff like that, which, you wouldn't really think as far as being something to include in an internship. But I think that's really awesome that they had those opportunities. So before I go on to any of my other questions, I do just want to also go ahead and open it up for if anyone on the call has questions. We have two ways that you can ask. You're welcome to either post your question in chat and I can just read it off there, or there's the raise hand feature. You are welcome to use that if you're unfamiliar with it. Should be just down at the bottom of your screen for you to raise your hand. Or you're also welcome just throw it on chat and say, hey, I'd like to ask a question next, and I'm happy to call on you and you can come on to talk. Again, too, if you're joining us a little late, if you're in a place where you're able, we would love to see your faces and get to talk to you some more that way, but I totally understand if you're not. So while I give you all some time to maybe think of what questions you have, Ellie, I'm going to start with you again. What would you say was the best part of your internship this summer?
So I'd say probably the best part of my internship was talking to higher level executives that I was very nervous to talk to at first. And kind of, whenever you're Zooming someone and you're kind of inviting them into your space. So it's automatically, even though it's supposed to be very formal, I felt like they understood that everyone's in their home setting and like you kind of want to feel more comfortable. So and they made me feel very comfortable. I wasn't walking into like their really nice office and sitting down and talking to them. Like I was in my house and they were in their home, and they made it very comfortable. And after every single talk, I just felt like they knew me so much better than I thought they would after 30 minutes of just talking to me. A lot of them did give me advice on future like career moves, and it was amazing how much experience they had in their brain, and they said they could like relay it onto me and kind of know automatically like where I might want to be in 5 years, 10 years, and really getting to know me. I think it was very uplifting just to talk to those executives and have them actually care about who I am and where I'm zooming in from and how my family is structured, like just random things like that made me feel very comfortable and made me really enjoy my internship.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Blake, how about you?
Yeah, so I think the best part for me, Goldman does coffee chats kind of with they really employ that, like, go out, meet people, kind of get to know people from different areas and learn what they're doing. So that was kind of my favorite part of the internship. I think by the end of it, I did about 28 coffee chats. So I kind of did 1 to 2 every day, and they're about 30 minutes long. And we kind of just chatted about, either life, or I'd ask them about their teams, what they do. And so all of them were kind of different. You never knew what your coffee chat was going to go like if it was going to be, about you and what you're doing, or if it's going to be a lot about like, if I'm super interested in like what they're doing at Goldman, it would go for about 30 minutes about that. But I really got to meet just a range of people, whether that was from like interns to managing directors to vice presidents within the firm. So I really loved just getting to meet different people, learn about what they're doing, and learn about their experiences, whether that was in like the Dallas office or New York City or Salt Lake City, and just see what their life's like and what they're doing at Goldman.
That's awesome. I really love that. Although I love everything that involves coffee. So that's awesome though. And especially that you got to meet people who you probably would never have been introduced to had you been in person. So that's really fantastic. Wes, how about you?
Yeah, so my answer is pretty similar. I know everyone keeps saying people, but I definitely think people is my favorite part as well. And I think that's because obviously when you're in person, it's such a more immersive experience. And so you have all the small interactions where you pop your head into someone's office and you talk to them. And so because it's virtual, I think those small interactions, you really have to push them and and what you're trying to say and do every single day. And so I would say that was absolutely the best part. And for me, like I kind of talked about in one of my previous answers, it was like Ellie said, talking to the VPs and being so casual and then talking about their family and then learning more about me. And then for me too, when I was working with different people across, people that weren't on my team and weren't even in procurement, I would set up meetings kind of like Blake, and they were coffee chats where we'd get to know each other. And then I remember for our final presentations, you got to invite anyone you met over the whole summer. And so it would be managers, it'd be VPs, it'd be leadership team members, or anyone. And so I remember on our final call, all the interns had over 100 people on each one of theirs. And it wasn't the same people. So not everyone had to go to them. It was really just people you had met that cared about you. And so obviously you're really nervous going into your final presentation because you are in front of, that group of people that have to come that are really important stakeholders in your project. But it was really nice to see, and they introduced you. The Zoom chat was just blowing up with people like, go big, go orange, go balls, like, you got this, Wes. And then after, I remember receiving like 30 emails or chats that were like, congratulations, you did awesome. We'd love to see where you go. And then just kind of gave us your phone numbers. And so I've actually talked to someone probably from ExxonMobil once a week, every single week since I've left. And whether it was casual, in our group meet with our other interns, or just people checking in on me. And so I would definitely say it's super important, and kind of advice for employers moving forward is all those small interactions do mean a lot to us, especially because if the intention is for you to go back full time or possibly go back full time, we don't get as a good of a sense of the culture. And so we really use the people to kind of define the culture in our experience.
I love that. I feel like you almost made me cry talking about all the people who showed up to your presentation. That's really sweet. Cool. Brandon, how about you?
Yeah, I know that everybody's been saying people, and people were definitely a great part of Caterpillar. But for me, the best part was the amount of responsibility and trust that my supervisor and my teammates ended up giving me on my project. So because I started a little bit late, the project had actually already started. So there was a basis for how I was to approach but they really let me just take that project and make it my own, bring in, you know, my skill sets, my ideas, and, you know, I'd run it by them, they'd approve it. And, you know, it kept going back and forth, and I really got to make it my own and really run with it. And they trusted me to do that. And so there were some days where I didn't necessarily meet with anybody, but they were just trusting that I was, you know, doing that project, and they were at ease knowing that I was handling the whole component of that project. I was scheduling the meetings across the globe. I was the one building all the spreadsheets, following all the documentation rules and all this type of thing. And so just that amount of trust and the responsibility that they gave to me to really grow and see, you know, with this being my first internship, I didn't necessarily know, you know, just from my base learning, what I could contribute to a company, you know, where my ideas work and where they would fall short. And now I really know, you know, my worth and my values and my skills, and where all that aligns.
Yeah, I love that. And I think something I just want to point out too is, you know, when you were hired, you were still a sophomore here. So I really love and appreciate that the folks at Caterpillar were willing to invest in a sophomore in that way, and just kind of put that trust there, because I know you've done some pretty cool things with them already, which I think is fantastic. So I see Bill threw a question in the chat, and just kind of explain, you know, it's a new experience for everyone, employers as well. So what did each of you personally do to drive engagement from your side, and to put the employers at ease? That might not be something you necessarily thought of, that your employers were also very nervous going into this, but what did each of you do kind of throughout the summer to drive engagement from your end? I'll let whoever feels like they have a great answer first talk.
I would say that throughout this internship, I kind of learned something about myself, is that I'm not very patient. And so I had to really work on that throughout my whole internship. I had to be patient with myself, patient with technology, especially. Sometimes Zoom wouldn't work and you just have to figure it out. Sometimes my manager was like, hey, I can't Zoom today. Can I just call you on the phone real quick? And I was like, of course. I mean, I think being patient with my managers, with my whole team, was one thing that I really had to work on, and also being patient with myself. I think one thing I had was one of my mentors, whenever I first met her, I had my camera on, and she actually is an engineer, and she was like, you know, none of our calls we ever put our cameras on. And I was like, okay, well, like, if you don't feel comfortable, that's absolutely fine. And by the end of the internship, she was like, Ellie, you've really changed me. Like, I've been putting my camera on in all of my team calls because I want to be more engaged. And so I guess I was kind of setting that standard for her, that every time she talked to me, she kind of had her put her camera on. You know, she might have she's like, I'm sorry, I just worked out, I look like this. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I think that I was able to help her engage better virtually, whereas like she's probably used to being in the office, and giving her that opportunity to feel more comfortable engaging virtually.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I love that. I know something for me that has always confused me since I worked at UT is the amount of students that walk around like FaceTiming people, and like, which is something I would never choose to do. And so I do think, you know, like this generation, just kind of like as a cultural thing, is like a lot more comfortable in like face-to-face virtual communication. So I think that's awesome that was kind of a precedent you're setting. Anyone else want to add to that question? Any ways that you drove engagement with your company?
I would definitely say for me, it was really important. I learned to just be honest and ask questions, because obviously when you're online, the employers aren't able to see when you're asking, when they can't just pop their head in and be like, hey, is there anything going on? And so I think to make them feel like make sure that you're making progress and that you're doing your work, is just kind of to be honest, ask questions. And then I would say make a true effort to communicate with them. And so it's really easy, I think, online, especially when you're given a project and you can kind of work on it all day, to just kind of silo yourself and not really say anything to them. But definitely making the effort to communicate with them and be like, hey, here's kind of an update. And obviously not every day you need to like hit them up every 5 minutes when I just did this, but just kind of letting them know general progress you're at, or just kind of messaging them and taking the first step as well, because obviously they are managers. So when you're an intern, all your only concern is your intern project, but their concern is your intern project and then what they actually have to do. And so I would definitely say it's not just on the employers to kind of take that active approach. It's definitely on the intern to make sure that they're updating their manager and making sure that they're showing that they are responsible and can be dependable if they were to come on, especially full time.
Sure. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'll piggyback off of that. I definitely had to learn to not be afraid to ask a dumb question or ask someone to repeat something if I didn't understand it that first time around. So just really engaging with them, and if I didn't understand something, you know, they're really my only resource necessarily to really know that part of the business. And so I had to ask questions even if I, you know, thought they were very simple, and just because I had to learn. And that, I think that really developed me to be able to just ask questions whenever I don't know the answer, and, you know, be not knowing the answers is okay, and realizing that.
For sure. Thanks. Yeah, I think something important to remember too is just for the employers on this call is making sure that interns and just new employees in general know who enough people within your organization are that they can also reach out to others to ask questions. Because I think that was a big piece of like negative feedback I got back was, you know, I was given like 3 people as contacts, and like they weren't always the people who knew how to answer my questions. And so it would take, you know, a lot more effort from me having to reach out to my supervisor and say, this is my question, and then them have to figure out who to reach out to as well. So I think that's where I know all of you talked about the different networking opportunities you had, like become really key, because you get to meet those people who you're like, oh, they probably know this, and I don't have to bother this same person for the 5th time today. So Jared, I saw you said, was there anything you preferred from this summer's internship compared to a traditional in-person internship? So I know a few of you have multiple internship experiences. So if there's anything you all would add to that, anything that was preferable with virtual as opposed to in-person?
Yeah, so I've interned at I think this with Goldman was my 3rd internship. And so I've had a lot of different experiences working in different areas, but I think something that I really preferred more within the virtual internship is the ability to just meet with anyone. Like it didn't have to be someone that sits at the desk right next to you. I was able to, like, you know, get on Zoom with someone who might have been 6 floors up from me in the office, or someone that might have been halfway across the country. And I think that's something you might lose in the in-person experience, as you kind of get honed in about the people that are around you, and you kind of just think, you know, like, oh, I need to network with people that work here. But I know for like Goldman, there's so many other people that work across the globe. And so being able to connect with those, being able to just, you know, pick up my laptop and say, you know, like, hey, I'm going to call someone wherever they are, whether they're in like in Europe or within the US, and just kind of learn about what they're doing, what their office is like, and maybe what their culture is like over there, and kind of getting to hear about their experiences as well.
That's awesome.
I would say for me, obviously I would say a lot of people that are full-time employees also agree, like sometimes working from home is just easier in general. And so not that you're taking the whole day off to do other things, but I remember, you know, having a dog or having something else to do, kind of being able to be at home and kind of manage both of those was really nice. And then I would say, like, obviously being virtual, a lot of companies made a huge effort, kind of like Blake said, to get connected across the board. And so I think that set a standard that my other internship previously, you communicated a lot while you were at work, and then it was just about work with people around you. But again, setting that standard of like meeting people that are VPs across the board and meeting different people across all different departments and organizations was definitely really nice, and completely different experience than I had in my first internship. And I would say a lot of that was caused because of the virtual internship, because they wanted to make sure you were so well connected. And so that was definitely what I enjoyed more from this internship.
This might have just been me, but I had no clue how to use like Microsoft Outlook calendar until this past summer. And so I was able to look at my schedule and like know what's ahead of me for the day. And then also look at, say, my manager's schedule and say, okay, I know that he's in this call for this period of time. I'm not going to email him until after he's done with that call. So just having that knowledge of like what other people are doing within that day. This might have just totally been me. This might have been available in my traditional internship. But sometimes my manager wouldn't come in office and I just wouldn't know if he was like on a sales call, or I just wouldn't know if he was busy, or if like if I had a question, if I needed to text him rather than email him if he wasn't going to be in office. So just having that knowledge of what other people are doing within that day, and having a Zoom schedule. Okay, like I have this Zoom, and then right after that I have this Zoom, and I'm not just siloed in my project by myself. I would have other people that I could talk to, and know if someone else would be on a call, or if I would be able to put some time on their schedule to talk to them.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. So I've had a few other questions come into me. So how did, and any of you can answer this, how did your company adapt your project or assignments in order to make sure that you were still doing like meaningful work, and also like set up to succeed while doing stuff virtual? Because I know all of you were originally hired to be in-person employees. So I'm just curious, in what ways did things change, and how did they kind of support your project specifically?
I can hit that one first. So really, obviously, that was one of my main concerns going into the summer. One, that I was afraid I wouldn't be able to provide as much value as I wanted to. And two, that they wouldn't have adapted my project. Obviously, I was supposed to start like 4 weeks earlier than I actually got to start. So it was about a month difference. But going in, I remember when I kind of mentioned that they had reached out to me a week or two before, it was clear they spent a lot of time and thought reorganizing all of our projects across the board. So there were 14 other interns, and every single person had meetings with the managers and people who recruited us, making sure it was realistic. And so I remember one of my first meetings, they had a presentation that had like different milestone goals, and they ran it by me and they're like, do you think this is realistic? And they even said, obviously right now you may not be able to know because you haven't gotten to get into your project, but I think they were just really, they showed that they were going to be really adaptable with me through the whole time. And so their expectations, they straight up told me, were lower than originally they'd expected because of the time constraint. But then they also said, but if you get to a point where you think you can do more, we have extra add-ons to your project. And I think that was really good because it made sure that I was learning the whole summer, and there was never a stopping point of they made it too easy almost where I would just be finished and have nothing to do. They made it so that that kind of with my project to be a prototype phase. And then if I got past that, there was just always more I could do. But I really appreciate the fact they spent a lot of time on making sure that I would still be able to get as much as I could out of the internship. Obviously being virtual, and I was still able to learn a lot because like you said, I think a lot of people's frustrations and some of my friends were that, companies weren't necessarily teaching them what they originally signed up for. And obviously this year was completely different because they didn't have much time to adapt. But I would say if virtual internships are kind of the new reality for some companies, definitely putting a lot of thought behind it and making sure they're still able to get a lot of value is super important.
For sure. Thanks. I love that was like a scaffolded approach that they took, as far as like kind of providing you with like the easy part first and building as you went along, rather than setting up huge expectations and kind of making it a little bit like unwieldy to approach. Blake, did I see that you had a comment?
Yeah, one thing that really helped me as well in my projects was before my internship started, I kind of asked if there was any resources I could obtain before like starting, just to learn about maybe some acronyms or anything that might be useful in the workplace. So they sent me 2 books. One was called The First 90 Days. It's kind of about how to make an impact when onboarding and like your first 90 days at a company. And it's a really interesting book. I would challenge all of you to read it. It's really good. But then there's another book just about the terms that might be associated with operations and finance. So those are really useful to my project just because you can't really learn all those in a day. So reading that book really gave me like a highlight, made me go out of my way and kind of make some notes about what I might need for my projects and kind of go back to it once I got into the project and see, like, oh, what does this acronym mean? Or what does this term mean? So that really helped me when going into my projects.
Awesome. I bet you weren't expecting homework before it even started. Anything else anyone would like to add to that question? Cool. Well, we have time probably for about 2 more. So if anyone wants to either, like I said, you're welcome to raise your hand. You're welcome to throw it in the chat. I also have plenty of other questions myself. So almost all of you have mentioned interacting with vice presidents or executives in some way, shape, or form. Can you maybe just talk a little bit more about that, like what that looked like, maybe if it was part of a certain program? Because I think, engaging with leadership is really important. important and something that not necessarily everyone gets to do in their internships. So I'd love to just hear a little bit more about what those interactions with executives look like.
So with one of my calls, I knew that this was an executive that was going to be there for my report out presentation and maybe taking notes, not judging, I don't think, but kind of there for us to present to if we were to be in person. And so when I set up that one-on-one with him, I was fully prepared to maybe run through my presentation and get some feedback. And then he briefly talked to me about that. He was like, yeah, so I looked over your report out, the presentation, and it looks good. Do you have any questions? And I had a few questions about like how it would kind of go through that day. But then he really wanted to talk about me and talk about how I was enjoying my internship. It was kind of at the end of it, and how my team had done to make me feel like I was part of the project. And it was, I mean, I think I've already talked about this, like it was very casual. It was very, it made me feel more comfortable because I was very nervous. But it was obvious to me that he just wanted to get to know me. It wasn't him judging me or wanting to say, hey, I saw this on your slides and I don't think you need this, or I don't think you need that. He was helpful in that way. But at the same time, it was so much more than just, you have a report out coming up. Are you ready for it? It was, how was your internship? How are you doing? How's your family? How's quarantine? Everything under the sun that you could have talked about this summer. I feel like he was able to fit that in for 30 minutes of his day. And I was forever thankful for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that definitely, I know to me, situations like that always make me feel a lot more valued when people who like don't really have the time for those conversations make the time for them. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, my situations with meeting with the executives were very similar. You know, they were more focused on, you know, how are you doing? You know, what's going on in your life? You know, yes, your projects are important, but I want to get to know you as the individual employee rather than just, you know, what you're contributing. And it was really cool to connect with them, and they want to know where your interests lie. You know, what opportunities at the company interest you. You know, where do you see yourself going, and that kind of the prospect of that.
Very cool.
Yeah, I remember we originally had very formal process of, you know, like I said, once a week we'd meet with a VP, and I remember they'd always be like, if you see any free time on my calendar, feel free to add something. You know, at first we were all nervous too, because we're like, they just say that, but then they meant it. They would follow up with us too, and it was really nice because you get on those one-on-one sessions and they would have already done their kind of research on you. So they would have their department or something, and they'd be like, okay, I see you're doing this project. How do you see it relating here? And they weren't really quizzing you, wanting to know, like, did you know? But they were just genuinely interested in how your project would affect the company overall. And so I really appreciated taking the time to not only have those 1 hour conversations with us, which was an open Q&A, but also obviously set time with them. And they immediately accepted it, and they're really excited. And then, you know, after they'd connect you on LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff. And so again, I think that really helped shape my internship experience.
That's great. Awesome. So I have one more question, and then I also want to share a few kind of things as wrap up. So if maybe just one or two of you want to answer. I know one of the most important things from most of my conversations with you all and other students, whenever just trying to decide like, hey, is this company going to be right for me after I graduate? Like, is this somewhere that I actually could see myself growing in a career? Is just learning the culture of the company. Which I understand is probably pretty hard to do when you are never there in person. So could one or two of you share maybe how you were able to get a sense of the company's culture through being fully virtual?
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit. I think one of the big things that we kind of had to look at with, like, if you wanted to accept a return offer, was you've never been to the city. And that was kind of like something you kind of had to think about. So like, you know, I've been to Dallas for like a couple hours on a layover, but I've never like stayed and like learned about what's going on downtown or anything. So that was really hard. But I think having the buddies and the mentors. My buddy was only like 2 years older than me. So he was, I kind of could ask him those questions and say like, what's it like living downtown? Like, what's the good areas to live in? Like, what do you guys do like on the weekends? Like, what is the office like when you go to lunch? Like, do people go to lunch with you, or do you all just like kind of eat at your desk, or how does it kind of work? So those are like really good people to connect with and just kind of learn about the culture in that way. But additionally, they kind of had some resources for us as well, looking at like Dallas. One night we played like Dallas bingo, and they kind of like gave us a presentation about Dallas, and then we played bingo, and some people won some prizes. So just kind of like learning in the different areas, just kind of, if you are accepting like full-time offers there, just being aware of like, like you got to kind of learn what the culture is like as well, and understanding what's going on around you.
Awesome. So would one more of you care to share?
Yeah, I can share. So I think the way that I really got exposed to the way Caterpillar culture is just by the sheer amount of people that I reached out to meet with. So like in a lot of these executive one-on-one meetings, I would ask them, hey, who are people in, your organizations that I should talk to and learn about all the different parts of the company? And I'd always ask pretty much all of them, what's your favorite part of Caterpillar? What keeps you staying here? What keeps you working here? And just hearing that the passion that they have for the company, and just making, keeping the world moving, and all the kind of emphasis on that was something that was really cool to hear just from so many people. I remember the last few weeks of my internship, I had back-to-back one-on-ones just throughout the day. Because I mean, at that point, I had wrapped up my projects. I had been working on presentations and just kind of finalizing that. So I was like, let's take the time to sit down with all these people I've been told who excel in their positions, and learn about what they love about Caterpillar and why they work here.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, I really appreciate Blake and Brandon, that both of you kind of took the initiative to really learn about the culture in those ways, and to ask those questions. I think that's really key in figuring out whether or not it's going to be like the right place for you moving forward. Which I mean is fitting, considering both of you are continuing on with the companies that you interned with. So I think that's really fantastic. I just want to thank the four of you for joining me today and sharing about your experiences. I think this has been really great, and I just really love hearing about how you all summers went. I know you all had just really phenomenal times at each of your companies. Before we wrap up, I do want to share just a couple things with you all. So again, like I said, you got to hear from 4 students today. I've been talking with a lot more than that over the last few months. And so I kind of want to share with you what my top tips for supporting virtual young professionals are, just as kind of a recap from what they said. And a lot of these are going to be a little bit of a repeat of what you heard, but the things I want you to take away from this. So first, equipping and educating, making sure that your new employees have all the resources necessary to do their job, and have easy access to, whether it's like guides, like videos, anything like that, that can teach them how to, access a certain system or do a certain process. Establishing goals is really key. I know Wes talked about how, Exxon used a scaffolding approach where they said, here's this easier part of the project, and we're going to continue to move on from there. So having both short and long-term goals so that employees can kind of self-evaluate too and know where they stand. And also making sure those goals are directly related toward teaching them competencies relevant to their major or career interests. And then also evaluating regularly. I loved how every one of you talked about how you had meetings basically like every day with people. And I know at least one of you, met with your supervisor every day for one-on-ones, which is, a lot. But I think it's really important to remember that this generation especially really values consistent feedback. And it sounds like that's pretty consistent among our panelists today, that you all really enjoyed kind of being able to check in with people and talk about how you were doing and where you were in your projects. And so making sure that that's built into it, of those regular evaluations, both like formal and informal. But then finally, encouraging community. The students who reported that their companies really valued community and really pushed like, hey, we're going to do these lunch and learns, we're going to do these coffee chats, we're going to assign you a mentor or a buddy, they were significantly more likely to accept a job with that company afterwards. Whereas students who said like, no, I felt very alone, pretty much all consistently said like, I'm not gonna pursue a job here now. Because that community is such an important piece of talking about like who your company is, what your culture is like, and really helping new employees just feel valued and feel like they're a part of the organization, especially in a virtual environment. But even if it's a traditional internship, just making sure that you're doing things that really drive community and drive connections. So that's all I have for you as far as our presentation goes. I would really love it if you could take a second and give us feedback. If you go on to the app, you'll see there's a little rate now button. You can provide any comments for us. So please provide any feedback that you have. And also don't forget to join us for our sessions tomorrow. We have David Morgan and Kevin O'Meara talking about navigating a global supply chain. And then Mary Holcomb and Mary Long talking about the future trends shaping transportation. And then we have events going on throughout the next couple weeks as well. So be sure that you check out the app to see what's going on. But thank you again for joining us. It was great to get to see and talk to you guys. And thanks again to the panelists. You all have a great day.